First of all, thank you for showing up. Looks like we got a good group today, and it looks like a lot of folks from the project management community. So th thank you for being here. I appreciate it. So today, I'll be giving you a quick workshop. It's about an hour and a half. I'll be showing you some templates along the way, perhaps some discussion along the way, and we'll be talking primarily about planning. Um, and I'll get into the agenda here shortly. My background, real quickly, I'm a program manager over at the Data Science Institute. I manage one of the strategic initiatives, 5.3. It's primarily focused with the University of Arizona Health Sciences Department and setting up a secure enclave for protected health information and where um, PIs and lab members could collaborate with that type of data in a secure enclave. And then I also uh, do program coordinator for the data science fellows, which is mainly comprised of folks out of the health sciences departments. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So this first slide here is the agenda. So I'll go quickly over the workshop series, the framework. So you could see there's three different sessions that I give. This is the second one of the three, and I'll show you that. The references that I use for this particular presentation, I do a quick leadership primer, and then I get into a planning process deep dive, and then we'll get into some key takeaways, and then end with some Q&A, and maybe some discussion as well. So here is the workshop framework. In this particular session, the purpose is to introduce and provide a planning solution for efficient planning efforts where you are. So the idea here would be, doesn't matter what department you're in, that you should be able to at least use parts of this, if not all of it, to help solve some of the problems that you may be faced with. So the first, as you can see here, it's grayed out, but it's the foundation. And I talk primarily a good overview on leadership. And you can kind of see throughout each one of these sessions, I always hit on leadership as a primer, just because leadership, I feel, is the foundation for successful environments, to get rid of any toxic working environment issues that you may have, that allows a team to then collaborate, cooperate, and critically think when they're thinking about planning, and then ultimately into project management, the execution of whatever project you may have, or just day-to-day operations of your department. And then today, the planning piece kind of went over the agenda already. And then for project management, I just do an intro to project management, get into some of the tools, some of the templates, and then get into key takeaways. So here's some of my references. The Project Management Institute, they have some very good references, and here I'm using the Project Management Body of Knowledge, 7th edition. That's the most updated version. The Process Groups at Practice Guide, Sun Tzu, The Art of War, and then I have some Marine Corps, two doctrinal pubs, and a warfighting publication. And you're probably wondering, like, hey, why is this person talking about the Marine Corps? Well, I spent just shy of 29 years in the Marine Corps. Um, I'm now retired. I retired in October of 21. Um, and planning is something that I've been doing since 1993, and it's been ingrained on how do I look at a problem and then come up with a solution that is flexible but yet meets the requirements of whatever we're trying to achieve in the end. And then last thing I'll say is I am a project management professional, and so I got certified in September of last year. So it's just kind of rounding out some of my Marine Corps experience. now into the civilian side. So that's what has influenced a lot of these references that you're seeing here. Okay, so I'm going to get into creating a culture of success, and this is the leadership primer piece. So lead where you are. I always say this because doesn't matter your position within an organization, you're a leader in your own right, and you can lead wherever you are in that organization. And so as we're talking about that, being consistent, being persistent, having energy and patience for the following things. So in my first workshop session, I talk about leaders doing three things consistently. They provide guidance, they manage risk, and they make decisions for the organization or within a team. And that providing guidance could come in the form of setting priorities. It could just be verbal. It could be inside a team meeting. Could be one-on-one with a colleague. Could be a number of ways provide guidance comes into play. Managing risk, obviously, that could come from anything from budgets to other key decisions that an organization may make that is on the shoulders of those leaders within that organization that have the authority to make those decisions. And then ultimately leading to making decisions on a timely fashion to allow people to do the things that they need to do, so that way they can get their job done. And so I look at leadership through two lanes. So there's that leadership lane, and then you have a direct report lane. And from a leadership perspective, you're communicating, you're maybe teaching, and then you're providing performance feedback and those expectations of what you require of your direct reports, um, or just colleagues in general. And like I said, you could be leading anywhere within that organization. And a lot of times, providing guidance again comes in the form of setting priorities or what have you. So, from a leadership perspective, you're providing that guidance, and as a direct report, you're just trying to understand, making sure that you understand the guidance that is being provided. And then for teach, you're training and mentoring the people within your organization, and those direct reports, they're just trying to learn and apply what you've taught them. And then from performance feedback, it comes in the form of performance evaluations, or here at the university, I've been exposed to the yearly discussions for career discussions. So it could come in a number of forms of wherever you are and the way your organization does that. And from a direct report perspective, it's just trying to understand overall performance. What are the things you need to sustain? What are the things you need to improve on? And then ultimately, the expectation from the leadership piece is implicit execution, that the leader doesn't need to be watching you like a hawk to make sure that you're executing your duties. And then from if you're in that direct report role, like I am here at the Data Science Institute, I just want to make sure I'm doing my job and I'm doing it to the best of my ability, but I'm meeting the standard. But right here is where I see we're executing those duties on a day-to-day basis. And so you're constantly learning and applying, and then you're constantly getting feedback, or I would hope that that's what's happening, to that way you're improving within that organization. Um, but you have these four things at play all the time. And these are the four types of friction that are at play, that are always involved in these relationships, and self-induced, external, physical, and mental. And what I'm trying to lay out here is that everything that we do in the leadership realm is tied 100% to the human dynamic, the relationships between humans. And self-induced friction are those things that could come by way of, maybe it's no guidance for something that you need to do. Maybe it's a poorly laid out plan. It could be a number of things. Maybe there's maybe the way you track projects or don't track them. It could be a number of things that you can control, that are self-induced, or things that you're doing, that could cause disruption within your team. That external friction are all those things that we have zero control over. And what I say to that is we may not have control of what is happening around us or things that are coming down the pipe, maybe from executive level um, down, or it could be weather. It could be a number of things that are causing a disruption. It's the way we respond is where we need to be, and that's need to be the focus, not the complaining about what is externally occurring, but how do we respond ourselves in execution. And physical and mental, pretty self-explanatory there. On the physical piece, could be anything like um, you're working long hours is one of the examples I like to provide. And then that mental friction could be things that are happening on the home front that you're bringing to work. Maybe there's things that are happening at work that you're bringing home, and it could be a combination of both. It could be something completely like you read something in the news, and now it's impacting your psyche. So the way I look at all this is, again, at the core, it's a human endeavor. Everything we do as leaders and what we're doing within organizations. And so bringing forth humility, being authentic in yourself, and having that positive mental attitude in everything that you do within that organization will allow you to combat and mitigate the impacts of these four types of friction and solidify good, solid relationships amongst leaders, direct reports, and bringing as best we can the collaboration, the cooperation, and allowing critical thought to be a real thing. And overall, again, going right back to consistency, being persistent, having the energy and patience to allow all this to occur within your organization. So this picture here, it's Denali reflecting off of Wonder Lake in Alaska. And from afar, it looks beautiful. It's like, wow, that's pretty stunning. And that's why I look at leadership. A lot of times there's leadership positions and it looks amazing from afar. But once you get into this terrain, if you're not properly trained, you don't have the conditioning, you don't have the right equipment, the right tools, it could be catastrophic. And so I look at leadership like that. And the challenges that you're going to face are going to be conflict management. There's going to be biases that you're going to have to contend with. And this doesn't mean other people's biases. These are your own biases. And um, there is a book, Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, and he does talk about biases. And I did not list it as one of my references up front, but it is listed here on my slide, where uh, Malcolm Gladwell he puts he puts you through a couple exercises to be able to identify um, what is inherent into you on your own biases, and like how do you think about things, how do you think about people, situations, politics, all that stuff. But it's just a simple exercise that you can do for yourself to identify those things. And then you have professional insecurity. And when I look at these three, conflict management obviously is those things that are happening inside organizations. If you have a disagreement, or, how if you are brought forth a disagreement between two people that maybe you're in charge of, how are you going to resolve that? And those are those things that as leaders we need to be mindful. And again, I always talk about the humility, being authentic, and having that positive mental attitude to not turn it into an argument, but to turn it into a solution where people can get along. Because at the core, it's about the human endeavor and those relationships within those organizations that make that organization run smooth. And then that professional insecurity, I put this down because I feel in my entire career in the military, and this is my second civilian position since being retired. Um, if people are not comfortable, they and this is again others, but also yourself, identifying the way you respond when you don't maybe have all the answers. And that's where that humility comes into play. And I get it. You could only say I don't know so many times before maybe somebody looks at you as being incompetent. I get it. But there's those key moments that you may not have all those answers, and you need to have that dose of humility to be like, you know what, I don't know. I will get back to you, and we'll figure this out, and that's okay. And I just feel like those are those things that you can do and to apply um, to mitigate some of these challenges in the workplace or wherever you are. Um, Recommended actions. I talk about emotional intelligence. Simon Sinek, he's an author of many books, and he talks about emotional intelligence and how to be empathetic, putting yourself in other people's shoes, knowing your people, and this gets into like being engaged, being involved with the people that you're entrusted to lead, and those are all important aspects to be able to display that emotional intelligence. And then leading people, manage things mentality. Another key thing where you can manage a timeline, but it's different when you're managing people that have real things going on in their lives, and you just can't treat it like just a timeline. Can't treat people like they're a timeline. Just get it done and don't ask any questions. You need to be able to engage them. So those are some of those things that I say are have been keys of success for me to be able to do. And I think at the end of the day, when you just talk to people and engage with them, they're gonna let you know what you need to hear. So I'm gonna get into the planning process deep dive, and I will warn you that it's dense. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to stop. I'm gonna have some templates. I will get out of this particular slideshow. I'll show you templates, and I'll try to break it up so it's not so dense. But it is a lot of information, and it's a new process, I guarantee, to many of you, if not all of you. And it's something that leaving the military and coming out and working at a small business, that was my first job. We needed to start looking at problems and solving them. And quickly realized that on the civilian side, at least I haven't seen it. If anybody here has seen it, I'd love to get a reference. But I haven't seen a deliberate planning process that allows a team to follow and just to kind of organize their thoughts. Processes, as we all know, they're not going to think for us. We still need to bring the critical thought. We still need to bring the subject matter expertise to the table to bring about those solutions. But so I'm going to give you a process that has been influenced by a lot of my experience of planning everything from two-man operations all the way to multi service operations with over 4,000 people, multiple combat ships, multiple things that are going on at any given time, and forward deployed. So bringing all that chaos, right? And you're trying to bring organization to it. I see that here in the civilian sector, same thing. We're maybe not at that grand scale, but we're constantly looking at having to solve problems, organize ourselves to be able to be efficient, um, to be able to execute whatever we're trying to solve. So I'm going to start off with the definition of planning. And so there's many definitions out there, and I picked this one because it's right out of the project management body of knowledge, seventh edition, and it's pretty straightforward. It's like planning are those processes required to establish the scope of the project, refine the objectives, and define the course of action required to attain the objectives that the project was undertaken to achieve. I simply look at it, and that's kind of where it's exactly where I was looking at what am I going to name this particular workshop. This is where I got it from. I'm like, well, we need to understand what we're doing, what we're gonna do before doing it. So you got to understand the problem at the end of the day. You have to understand what the problem is before you apply a solution. And that's where that comes from, is understanding before doing. And so when you say like, why is planning important? Um, so in the Marine Corps, we say that planning is a preparation process. And that preparation process is about understanding. the problem before applying those solutions. And Sun Tzu, I really like this one. The second bullet here, planning is that by which harm is avoided and advantage gained. I just love that. And the reason being is that's precisely what you're trying to do is mitigate all those four types of friction we talked about. So when they do come in, if we have a well laid out plan, we're probably going to avoid a lot of harm. We're going to have more flexibility if the plan doesn't go as we laid it out. It's okay. Plans are meant to be flexible, um, but then you gain that advantage because you're saving yourself time, resources. Maybe it's in the form of money. Maybe it's in the form of manpower. Maybe it's contracting. Whatever it may be, it's allowing you to be more efficient and being more productive in within the time that maybe you have to solve that problem. And I simply look at it as just poor planning has often been cited as a cause of unsuccessful and failed projects. So, there's all kinds of one-liners out there about poor planning. And I know you guys have at least a couple of them yourself. As for a planning philosophy, so as I said, leadership I feel is at the core of the success of any organization, and I think when you're looking at it through the lens of leadership is driving the planning process, it's because they're involved. Because people are involved, they're invested in the solution, that they're going to be part of that planning process throughout, and then into the execution of whatever you're trying to achieve through the form of the solution that you end up picking and going with and executing. That one team concept is just bringing the whole team, the family being one team, bringing them all together. You may have people from different departments, but they can't feel that way. You need to make them feel as if they're part of one team, all focused on that common goal, what you're trying to achieve. And that one team concept, I think, is extremely important. And it's different from integrated planning because integrated planning is looking at it through the lens of the subject matter experts. It's looking at the lens of the people that you need at the table for to bring about um, that solution that you're going to come up with. And you're going to see through the planning process, we got to identify those shortfalls. We're going to need to identify any resource shortfalls that we may have, and making sure that you have the right people at the table at the right time for the right solution. So that integrated planning is powerful. Over here to the right, you can see that it's the project management triangle. It's dealing with the scope, the time, and cost, and those three things will ultimately impact quality of whatever you're trying to achieve. So when do we do planning? And in the process groups and practice guide, one of the references from the Project Management Institute, they lay out this like project life cycle. So, you start the project, you organize and you prepare, and then you carry out the work, and then you end the project. Very simply, obviously, maybe not. You're probably going to have your own phasing construct, but this is just simply laid out. But those process groups, you can see there's an initiating process. That initiating process could be in the form of a PI just simply saying, I got an idea. And then all of a sudden the team starts having a plan. So, but it could be a number of things. And we get into that when I start getting into the deeper dive of step one in the planning process. And then you get into executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing out the process. So once you start executing and monitoring, this is where I feel this is the distinction between planning and project management. Where planning, you're specifically thinking about the problem and trying to understand it. You're not admiring the problem, you're understanding it. And then once you get into further into the planning process, you're developing that solution. And then you have that solution, you're ready to go. Now you start applying those project management tools. Maybe it's software, whatever it may be that you're used to using in executing your projects. So here's the planning process that, again, you're not going to find it written anywhere like this. But step one is that framing session where you're gathering information, you're brainstorming to understand the problem. very deliberate process. And I would argue that's probably the most important um, part of this entire planning process, where you're stopping the entire team to really analyze all aspects of what you're looking at for um, for whatever you're trying to identify as a problem, and then you know that you want to apply a solution. In this step, we're not talking about solutions. We're not talking about any of that. We're just simply gathering the information to further, do that research to further inform our decisions down the line as we go through the planning process. Um, that second step is that solution development. And a lot of times, um, I like to look at it through um, the conceptual, functional, and detailed hierarchy of planning. So essentially, when there's an idea, there's a concept that comes out. This is just very conceptual, high level. And then all of a sudden it becomes more functional because now you're starting to apply, well, hey, we need to get this department involved and we need to get that department involved. And, hey, we might have these timelines that are loose right now, but we have these timelines, and then you want to start working backwards off those timelines. Well, that starts becoming more functional. And then all of a sudden, when you get into that detail level planning, now you're going after people's names. You know, Carlos Lizaraga is going to be part of this team here, and you're looking at actual dates on the calendar, that you're looking at milestones and critical milestones. You're looking at metrics. Then that's where all that comes into play. And then we get into step three, which is to evaluate the solution. And there's four simple questions that you want to ask, and all you're trying to do there is just improve the plan. And then we get into develop a written plan. If your organization doesn't like written plans, they're not used to doing something like that, you don't need to use the written plan, but maybe it's just in the form of a PowerPoint. It could be maybe just a Word document. Whatever it is that you use in your organization, and that's what you want to use. And then step five is that transition where you ultimately have the kickoff brief that we love to hear, right? We're about to kick off a new project. We come in, we deliberately sit down as an entire family that is comprised of all those subject matter experts, stakeholders, planners, etc. And then you kick off the project, and then you're off to the races. So here's step one. So before I go, does anybody have any questions, anything at all before I get into step one? Okay. All right. Right now we're doing pretty good with time. It's about 1:30, so we're looking pretty good. Okay, so again, this first step, the whole purpose of this step is just to achieve an understanding of the problem. That's it. You're not trying to solve the problem. You're not doing anything other than just understanding what you're dealing with. So that may come, some of the key inputs, right, may come in the form of a strategic plan. Maybe there's multiple, maybe there's business rules, maybe there's regulations, policies, and procedures that you need to follow. Maybe there's a grant agency funding program document. Maybe there's an approved or a draft proposal document that maybe you're just writing a proposal that is at its infancy, but there's already a draft. There may be notes, random notes, because you've gone to 7 meetings and you've taken down notes, or maybe your PI or your director or whoever's maybe going through collecting some of this data or information. Maybe it's in the form of email correspondence. It could be in a number of things. Um, and then some of the other things that are coming to play is, the experience, the expertise, the judgment of those of in charge, maybe your director, your PI, its staff, yourself. Um, and then one of the things to help this out and to help you organize is a framing session template that I'll be showing you once I get done explaining step one. So then those are the key inputs. And then we get into team actions. So it's like, okay, we need to start developing the organizational chart, identifying those key stakeholders, any partners, maybe it's the planners, And then identifying, like how is everybody linked? And I'll give you an example of that. Task analysis, like what are some of those tasks that are essential? That's something that is absolutely essential is probably gonna end up being the overall mission of your project. But there could be a number of essential tasks um, associated maybe with certain things like logistics, maybe administration, maybe reporting. There may be some requirements, specified and implied tasks, and then you have assumptions, limitations, requests for information, where there's nothing more than questions, just one singular, well thought out question. Um, in the form and reference them as requests for information. And then shortfalls. So you're identifying any personnel shortfalls, maybe any resource shortfalls. And that could be in the form of hardware, if it's resources, hardware, it could be software, it could be money, it could be the budget, it could be a number of things, time, um, depending on what you're dealing with. Risk and risk mitigation. Maybe if time, maybe not necessarily as a resource per se, but maybe that's where risk comes in, where your timeline is so short, you may run into risk. You might want to identify that and identify a some mitigating considerations. And then again, talking about time constraints, develop or validate a budget if one exists for this particular project, and then defining the problem. And I think the majority of grants that I've seen, and it looks like the problem statement is something that is generally developed. So that's it's in line with this line of thinking at this point in the planning process, and then that proposed mission statement. So then the key outputs. So when you get done with this process, you should have an approved mission statement. Your director, your PI, or maybe it's even your program manager, will probably develop or should be developing some kind of guidance to the team moving forward as they're starting to look at a solution. So this is that input into the next step. And then you should, if a budget was something that you looked at, even if it was in a draft form, um, then you should be coming out of here with at least a draft budget, and then that framing session brief that you're going to be able to provide then to the entire team, put everybody on the same page. After all those discussions are being had, you bring it all onto one document, and then you bring everybody and literally put everybody on the same page. So here is just a quick agenda of what that framing session would look like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. I'm going to bring up a framing session brief to just show you something that I came up with through a couple of my planning sessions and projects that I've been working on since being here. Okay, so here's that framing session template. So you just put the name of the project, look at it as one of the planning sessions, and here you probably put the framing session on here, and then get an agenda on here, like the one I just showed you. And then some things that I used to do here is just put like keys to success, just kind of reiterate the leadership piece, the collaboration, the communication, the accountability, things of that nature. And then you just start, as you start looking um, at the problem that you were faced. In this case, I came into a project that already had a higher level vision and mission. So I was able to put that up here because that's an input. Um, and these are the documents that I reviewed when I showed up, people I talked to. In this case, this particular gentleman, he works over at UITS, Ryan Deitman. And then I talked about the stakeholders and planners, the diagram, just to identify those folks. So that's what I did here. all the way to where our funding is coming from. In this case, it was health sciences department, and then all the way down to the list of planners who is involved in this endeavor. And then like request for information, very simply put, just a little tracker, nothing crazy. You're just capturing the date, who submitted it, the actual RFI, when you got the response, who responded to you, and then it could be something that the team could always reference and go back to. Assumptions, just captured. In this case, I only had a couple. Talked about funding, and it's funny. I had done this brief back in November of 22, and I didn't, you see where we're at with our budgets these days. But um, yeah, yes, there's nothing guaranteed when it comes to that in the first place, and that was one of the things that we talked about back then. Limitations, these are things that you can't do. These are things that you have to do, that we were able to capture. And then shortfalls, here we talked about personnel, we talked about in the resources realm, um, one of the big ticket items for us would be any software gaps or hardware gaps. We were good there, but we were short, at least three personnel that we thought at the time that we needed. And what was crazy of these three, we did fulfill a tech writer. Um, but we never did get a Python script writer, or we never got a Soteria trained developer. So even though that you may identify these shortfalls, you have to have workarounds. Risks and mitigation, this, since we're working with, um, in the case of my particular project, working with sensitive information in the form of like protected health information, working with the HIPAA Privacy Program Office was very important to us. So there was a lot of things and changes that were going on there that we had to mitigate. Um, so yeah, it could be a number of things in the situation that you're currently in that could ultimately impact um, your project. So task analysis. Um, for this particular one, I have an entire list of it was like 49 different tasks. And the idea here was, I wanted to capture it in the form of this responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. And those of you, I know probably everybody here is familiar with the RACI matrix or a RACI matrix. So this was a quick way when I came in and I was looking at this project for the first time. This allowed me to quickly identify those people that were involved in that particular objective and accomplishment of those tasks. So it was just a quick way for me to help me organize. So when I show you these slides, obviously it's flexibility of what works for you, of where you are, what is your current situation, and what is gonna help you organize your thoughts and the team to be able to come up with good solutions. And then we came up with a mission. Very military style. I get it. Um, but one of the most important things when it comes to any kind of mission is the purpose. Why are we doing something? And I think that is why, bringing it out, even though it's here, you're restating it here as a purpose, is just driving the point of like, this is why we're doing this. This is the motivation. This is why we're doing this as a team, as a family, to be able to accomplish what we're about to accomplish in this endeavor. And, in this case, our director, it was, you know, very good conversations, going back and forth to be able to establish not only the mission, but I even went further to get an end state. Like, what is the true, like, end state in the future to be able to help drive the project? But that's just a technique. I did come up with the project scope. It was identified in some of those input documents that I showed you up front. Um, some of this stuff was written out. We had to wordsmith it, just make sure that it was in line, and we went with it. But you can see it's pretty straightforward. And then at the time, I took the liberty to put together a planning horizon when I first got here, and I put it out through those the rest of the quarters that that I was seeing within that fiscal year when I first arrived. And then this right here, we're going to get into this in the next step. Um, but this right here would be that concept that I was talking about. Okay, we're back here. Okay, we're going to get into step two. Now that I went through step one, does anybody have any questions, any concerns, anything at all? Any feedback? Okay, thank you, Alicia. Okay, so for the solution development step, Um, again, the key inputs here be that approved mission statement, uh, the director of PI's solution development guidance to the team, maybe that draft budget we talked about, maybe, and then obviously the framing session brief. So the idea is that you're bringing all that information, you're just continuing to move it forward. So whatever you just created in step one isn't lost. It's actually valuable. You're just going to continue to build on it. And then you're going to have the template, solution development brief template, and then that rough cut solution template. So that last slide I just showed you would be that could be a form of a rough cut solution template. And there's two. So there's that one, and then I have another one that you'll see here shortly. So for team actions in this particular step, and before I'm getting ahead of myself, the whole purpose of this step is just to develop the solution to accomplish the mission. That's it. So that's why coming out of step one, making sure that the team understands, that's why it's important to understand what is that essential task, that mission statement of what we're trying to achieve to be able to guide the team into solving the problem. So for team actions, you want to develop a conceptual framework. It may be sequencing actions across time. You're looking at fiscal year, maybe it's calendar year, however the organization is looking at it. Obviously, here, the U of A from July 1st till June 30th within the years that fiscal year. So, is that the way you're organized? Is it in a phases? So it could be in the form of, and I'll get into it, of is it planning, you're executing, maybe you're building, and then you're implementing, and then you're sustaining. It could be a number of ways that you could put a phasing construct into place to be able to organize how you're going to do things moving forward in the execution piece of whatever project you're executing. Um, you're identifying those objectives. You're developing those key results. I know here at the U of A, when I was working with the strategic initiative, still working with it, obviously, um, those key results, they're tasks, but they call them key results. This is the way I've seen it, and they use this acronym SMART to help us develop a well, or develop an individual task. So making sure it's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound, and then adding that target completion date is really important. And then refining the org chart. So as I was saying, you may have a rough org chart coming out at step one. It shouldn't be perfect, it may not be perfect, but then here you're starting to refine. Hey, oh, you know what? We also need to add this person. That's okay. And that's why as you're looking at the planning process, you got to go in clockwise. In the center, it's counterclockwise because you're understanding and you're improving. So you may have to go back, and it's okay. And then you're refining and validating that budget. Then you're starting to refine that communication plan. How's the team going to communicate? Things like that. So key actions. So this is where this step isn't so just cookie cutter. This is where that human interaction is happening to make sure that you're interacting with that PI, with your director, or whoever else is overseeing the planning process. It's the dialogue that goes back and forth. So developing a rough cut solution is quickly coming up with a um, a quick concept to be able to then present it back to the director, the PI, or whoever's in charge, before you get into that super detailed level planning that then you should have maybe did an in progress review before you got into that deep end of planning, because maybe that you missed something. Maybe the PI or the director talked to somebody and now there's a new thing on the horizon and you need to implement something else in the plan. Bringing that back in the form of that rough cut solution, having another brief with that PI could be 30 minutes. Hey, this is what we're looking at. What do you think? Hey, that looks great. Think about this, think about that, or whatever it may be. But you get some direction, but you haven't spent too much time on it. So if it's you're going to the bad road, that's okay. That's why you catch it. And that's why you want to present it early to be able to get that rudder steer for the entire team. And what do? You save yourself frustrations down the road. You save your team a lot of headaches, things of that nature. And then you ultimately develop that detailed solution, which that key output on this particular step will be that solution development brief. So here's those rough cut solution examples. So the one on the left, you saw it on that last slide that slide deck that I just showed you. And it's just in the form of breaking it down through the fiscal year and the phasing construct. And you could see here, phase one was planning, phase two is service authorization, phase three was like the alpha, phase four was beta, and those are those pilots that we're running, and then we're getting into projects now, and then expanding the services that goes into steady state operations for phase five. And then this rough cut solution to the right is just in a form of a timeline. Nothing crazy, but you're identifying critical milestones along the way. You're still identifying a phasing construct here, planning, coordinate, execution, working proposal, finalize a proposal, and then across the quarters. And then maybe there's some key things that are going on. In this case, there was some travel. There was some hardware that needed to be purchased. In this case, some drones. And that purchase of drones didn't end up happening. But again, this was a rough cut solution, right? Right early on. So then here would be the solution development brief agenda. And I'll show you that example here. And I'll stop sharing this particular brief. And I'll show you this template. So this was quickly, you just put the name of your project, solution development brief, and then you're going to get through the agenda. And again, whatever works for your organization, but loosely put, we're going to go through inputs, quick orientation. You're going to see why I put that in there. Uh, the proposal submission, vision, and mission beyond, um, and then the actual mission for this particular project, stakeholders, planners, and then you're going to just see the various uh, ways that I put this together. So quickly, I went over all the inputs. This started off with three, and then it expanded to three more. So at this point, as you're going through the planning process, you're probably going to end up seeing more documents. So you want to continue to keep that updated. So that way, this is a good reference point now. So it's like, hey, this is all the documents. This is where they live, etc. Um, here was since this team was going to be traveling, I just wanted to put an orientation slide so they understood. Of course, everybody knows like, okay, they're going to Colorado, they're going to Alaska, but there was some ground transportation that they're going to be doing. So that way they understand like from the airport and all those things matter to me to be able to help out a team to understand like, do they need to rent a car? Can they just take an Uber or not? Those kind of things. Just gets into the details. Um, Again, here's like the vision mission, and this was the higher level. And then you capture the actual mission for the project, which is guiding the project and the rest of the team. And then here is that org chart that is essentially finalized here, and being able to capture direct who's administratively responsible for certain things, like Bio 5 in this case was administratively connected to the budget, and then the coordination piece. There was just people that we were coordinating with. Um, so, and it's just a quick snapshot of all the stakeholders, all the planners, things of that nature. And then here was the quick snapshot of the critical milestones. So when we did this, you could see there's some question marks still in the Colorado travel. That's okay. You can't have a perfect plan all the time right from Jump Street. They can figure this stuff out at a later date. But this is just to show you that it doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. And then, I just captured some of these things in this form. And then so this right here is very detailed. So there was three objectives for this particular um project. And you could see I had objective one laid out with all the key results, essentially the tasks, and then that RACI that I had up front to be able to capture people by name. And then objective two, same construct. Objective three, same construct. Then I got into the planning horizon. And then, in this case, we knew we were going to be doing um, some follow-up stuff. So I put together agenda here for the team, and then what's in scope. And then this is for the next step. And I put this here just to show like, okay, as we look at this particular plan, we're going to be looking at it through the lens of these um, four criteria. And then that was it. Okay. So we'll get into step three, which is evaluate the solution. So you saw um, from the last brief, the whole purpose of this would be to improve the solution and obtain director or PI approval for the plan. So that key input is going to be that solution development brief. You can have some templates here that is in the form of a Word document that is a project plan template. And then some of the key actions is you're going to be evaluating that solution utilizing these criteria. So is it feasible? Is it acceptable, suitable, and complete? And then you can start drafting that written plan. And then as you as you complete this particular step, all you're doing again is you're just trying to improve the plan and make sure, like, okay, and you're gonna see um, the criteria that I'm gonna go over and the questions that you ask yourself and the team to be able to answer to say, oh, you know what, we missed that, or you know what, we didn't address that. Ultimately, you get an approved solution development brief, and then you get a draft written plan. Would be the idea. So here for the criteria is like feasible. Does the solution accomplish the mission within the available time and resources? So looking at through the lens of budget, people, equipment, software, applications, any required training. There may be a number of other things, but that's the quick snapshot. Is it acceptable? Is the solution delivering acceptable return on investment, which is proportional and worth the cost and time and resources to accomplish the mission? Complete. Does the solution identify all the key results, all those tasks required to accomplish the mission? Does the solution identify risks and how to mitigate it? Is it suitable? Does the solution achieve the overall mission with alignment to the principal investigator's guidance or director's guidance or whoever is in charge of that particular project? So that's a quick rundown on that criteria. So then we'll get into develop that written plan. So there are some techniques on how to do this. So before I get into the fourth step, you could do it in the form of bringing in the team and to go around the horn and to say, okay, feasible. Does anybody identify any issues here with, um, you know, the solution not accomplishing the mission within the available time and resources? Someone may say, hey, we still have not identified, um, a tech writer. I don't know. It could be something significant, or maybe to the team, it may sound insignificant that no, I think we could do without that particular person. Um, so those are those conversations that would be had. And then you would just go through each one of these criteria and then get that feedback from the team. And then you would just, if there was something significantly missing that you're like, hey, we actually need to add that, you would add it. You go back, add it. You could probably do it right there on the spot. and then get immediate approval, or maybe you have to come back if it's significant enough and say, hey, we'll reconvene tomorrow just to quickly go over and just brief by exception. It could be nothing more than a 15-minute meeting, director and PI. Hopefully, again, it's all situational dependent on, do you have the time to prolong it, or do you have to do it right there? So, but that's essentially the way that you can do this. And then you get into to develop that written plan. The whole purpose is to publish the final written plan to accomplish the director or PI's approval of the plan. That's it, nothing more. And you're bringing in that approved solution brief. You already started drafting that written plan, so maybe there's just some minor tweaks that you need to do to it. And this is when you start maybe doing that reconciliation internally to the team. Maybe there's crosswalk. Maybe there's things that, like we talked about, inputs from step one. Did you identify some of the key verbiage? It could be maybe from the strategic plan. Was there rules or policies or regulations that you needed to follow and identify inside your plan that maybe were not? Those are all those kind of things that you can catch here. And then the final revision to a solution, and then having that, getting those final revisions to the budget, and then you ultimately get an approved detailed written plan. So what I'll do is I'll quickly show you just a template that we came up with here at the Data Science Institute to be able to have that written plan. So I don't know if everybody could see that, but essentially it's just a Word document that we put together, and just capturing high level. This is like the problem statement, some of the stuff that they need to, maybe some background, um, putting in the mission statement here. Um, that stuff that we talked about inside the plan, where the remission, resubmission, proposal, vision, mission, those objectives and key results, the critical milestones, timeline, the project team, partners and stakeholders, org diagram, and then at the end, maybe some administrative um, verbiage that you need to put in here, just so everybody's tracking. And then one thing that we started doing is right here, I put down a line that says approved by. If our director approves a plan, I put that our director and his name, title, and the date in which he said, yes, this plan is approved. So nothing crazy, very simple. And I don't know how your teams do or capture this type of stuff, but that's what it is. Okay, we're almost done. So then we get into transition, and then um, again, the purpose of this particular step and the final step is just to transition the team's focus from planning to executing. So you got that approved detailed written plan, you execute that kickoff meeting, and then the outputs is the entire team is able to set those expectations across the board. There's a common understanding of the plan. Maybe some people were in and out in the planning process along the way. This allows them to come together and get the full plan, and then acknowledge that the project has begun. And some of the most effective ways I've seen it is it just in the form of the solution development brief. Maybe it needs to be tweaked to be in concert the way maybe how your director or your PI, or maybe the way your project manager or your sales like to see it. Um, or it could just be the use of the written plan. If you wrote the plan, you could just scroll through the document and brief it however um, you see fit for your organization. Okay, so kind of bringing it all together. So, talking about planning, leading where you are, and this is bringing about the communication, that cooperation, the collaboration, the critical thought that needs to go into planning. And I always talk about up here the project management triangle up here on the left-hand corner. that scope, time, cost, always impacting quality and just being cognizant of that. And like I talked about up here in the blue banner with leadership, they're providing guidance, managing risk, and making decisions. And you're doing that in your own right within your own teams on a daily basis. And in order to make that a reality, this is at the core, is that human interaction with leadership, direct reports, and bringing about that humility, that authenticity, and positive mental attitude of how you're interacting and gaining and maintaining the trust across the team, having that open dialogue, all that good stuff. And this is where it matters. So then when you start planning, some of those issues don't arise and get into the way of coming about with good, solid solutions that make sense where you are, and they're very productive. So key takeaways here. Just I got four quick ones. So leadership at the end of the day is responsible for creating those healthy work environments and the culture, and ultimately, it's about creating the ability for humans to cooperate, collaborate, and critically think together in a team, and being cohesive to bring about these solutions. And then that second bullet is all about that leadership and team members just taking that ownership of their contributions to planning or whatever it is that they're doing on a daily basis. Um, and that third bullet, planning does not think for you. So this process isn't going to think for you, obviously, right? But it's not meant to be a chat bot. This is where you're coming in and you're collaborating and you're bringing your expertise to the table to bring about solutions. And this planning process is just an idea that allows you to organize your thoughts. Um, and again, it's very flexible and you can make it your own wherever you are. And then that last one, understanding the problem and improving the plan is continuous. It is constantly you're constantly adapting to your environment, to things that are happening. And so having that flexibility where we don't fall in love with the plan that we came up with is the best way to mitigate frustration, because things will happen. The plan's not going to go off the way you absolutely planned it. There's going to be some changes, and that is okay. But if you thought about it methodically, some of those changes, they're going to be less impactful than if you didn't think about it. You didn't have a plan to flex from. So, but understand the problem and improving that plan is continuous. Okay, so we're at 1 hour and 6 minutes. I know, well, 1 hour and 7 minutes now. But question and discussion. I know some folks had to take off already, and I don't want to hold anybody up more than they need to be. Um, but any questions, anything at all? Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody being here. Um, I guess I guess I do have one question for anybody. I'll just throw it out. Um, what are some things, maybe I'm sure there's multiple, but what are give me one challenge that somebody out there has on a daily basis that can be addressed that maybe I didn't even address in this particular presentation when it comes to planning. Is there anything? Okay, part two, going to go into how to manage college level portions of a larger project. Ooh, so Garnett, let me see, are you still on the line? Yes, you are. So you're asking about college level portions of a larger project that we don't have any control over. So when you say part two, are you talking about step two?
Yeah, I know this is a part two portion of your presentation. You have a second one coming up in like 2 weeks.
Oh,
And
yes.
and right, and so you have a lot of planning in this one, which makes sense. But I'm kind of interested to know if there's like an enterprise project that's going on and each college is supposed to implement their portion of that project and we don't have any of that higher level thing. How much of our planning of your presentation goes into our portion of it at the college level? Does that make sense? Do we have to sort of like
Yes,
redo
so
that, or does are
so
you going to go into more details on this next session on that level? I'm just trying to get a gauge for.
no, that's a good question, Garnet. No, so no, so when I landed here at the U of A, this is October of 2022. Um, there was no set, and I walked in a strategic initiative. So the only thing that they had us doing, it was a smart sheet, and there were reporting requirements every quarter. And so I suppose I can get into that. My next session is going to be on project um, management is my next session, and I can certainly add that to like, hey, this is something that I was required to present, and I had to report, and this is what the Strategic Initiatives Office wanted. And as you know, the Office of Strategic Initiatives is no longer there. So, but we do have a roll up at the end of this fiscal year. That's one of our due outs. So I don't know if that's what you're asking, something like that, like on a higher level. Like in this case, it was strategic initiatives that we're reporting to. So I do have an example of that. Would that be something of interest to you, Garnett?
Uh, Maybe. Um, yeah, it's kind of hard to say. Like since I work in IT, right, we get a lot of work down the end of the line for at our college level that says, okay, this is happening at the university as a higher level. We don't have any of the scope or any of that information kind of handed to us. It's just like, here's the individual outcome that needs to happen. And then we have to sort of like rebuild our own project management system
Yeah.
to meet that objective. And and so we don't necessarily have control over the milestones other than we have the final deadline. Boom, you have to meet this deadline and have all of this work done. And so re-engaging all of that planning then kind of comes in, there's a lot of stuff that we don't really necessarily need to do in your sort of like overview. But I guess in some ways we do have to redo some of those steps um, to have the understanding at our level, at our college level, of how that objective needs to be. And so I guess
Hmm.
reframing those steps to hit the end milestone within the larger project and is kind of my question.
Yeah, so this is perfect for those RFIs. So when you start framing that problem, and you're starting to look at it, if it requires because it's that complex or what have you, even if it's not complex, you can use some of these like right out of, some of those templates that I used and like in the form of RFIs to be able to ask, say if it's UITS that the project's coming from, to be able to come together as a team and develop some very deliberate, well thought out questions to get that feedback. That could be in the form of doing that. Now, just shy of them bringing you into their planning sessions, I don't know if that'll happen, or if they'll be able to give you any of those planning documents. Maybe there was something like a written plan that says, here, this is what we're following. It just so happens that you are being tasked with number five of these 20 tasks, and this is the bigger project, or this is the bigger initiative. So that could be a thing that you can ask for as well. So that part of that input could be like, again, I came in and there was strategic initiative documents that I had to reference as I came into this project to be able to understand the larger picture. So I don't know if that helps you, Garnett. But we could talk offline too, and we can we can develop a plan on how to maybe engage those organizations to get that information. Because I would like to know.
That's good. Thank you.
All right, Torbe, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah, following up on that question, I was thinking about parallels with like the university environment and also the military environment, and that external factors part that we can't control. I think that ties in to the previous example. We can plan for what we can control, and then I guess one question is how much time do we spend, planning for things that could go different ways, that's going to go up to a different college level that we can't control, that may come back to us. But yeah, definitely in the university environment, there are, yeah, we are limited sometimes on when we pass the baton, what's going to happen with things and if it's going to be successful. But it ties into that external factors piece for me. Yeah.
Okay. No, I agree. No, that's good feedback, Torbit. Thank you. Cynthia, we are going to have a recording of this session. So thank you for your comments. I appreciate that. And I will, and yes, we'll have that recording available. And then if you wanted to connect with me, if you wanted me to send you any, and this is for everybody, what I could do is I can load this stuff up in UA Box and then share a link. So if you want them, if you could, I think I have, I'll see all the folks that registered, and I could send, I could just send some spam mail out to you and just with a link if you're interested in those templates. Okay. Okay, good to go. I'll make that happen. Okay, any other questions? Anything at all? And then, and folks, I didn't have anything like formal for like feedback, but if you have anything that I can improve on this particular session, I would love to hear from you. Um, you guys are seeing things from different perspectives across this campus, and this was just my effort to try to um, implement something within Data Science Institute, and folks that had seen some of this stuff were like, hey, this may be of interest for other folks. So, but I would love to help anybody plan wherever you are. Um, yeah, I think it's one of my passions, I guess, now that I'm seeing it for what it is. So, but it's awesome. Okay. Well, folks, I don't want to hold you up on what you have to do today, and thank you for your time. And you guys are awesome. Thank you for all the questions, the comments. Appreciate it. And I'll make sure I get these documents and out on the in the project management portal as well. Thank you.